Alrighty guys, so today we're going to build on what we looked at yesterday, which is these characteristics that we use to organize market structures. Alright, so today I just want to start out with, I just want to recap. Which would have the most price setting power and why? So if we're looking at iPhones versus orange juice, right? Who do we think would have more control over their prices? Alright, so the first one, it would obviously be iPhone, right? So orange juice wouldn't have, or an orange juice company wouldn't have a lot of control over their prices. A, because they have a commodity, which means that no matter what brand of orange juice you're going to get, chances are it's going to be pretty similar to every other type of orange juice. All right. Secondly, there's a lot of competition for it, right? There's a ton of different orange juice companies, but they're all selling kind of a similar product. On the other side of things, though, iPhones are distinctly different than other types of phones. That doesn't mean that they're better quality necessarily, but they're definitely the most popular type of smartphone. And so because of that, they're going to have a lot more control over their prices. Secondly, with EpiPen versus Five Guys, it would be the EpiPen, right? And that would come back to the needs versus wants. The owners of EpiPen would be able to set their prices a lot higher. A, because there's a high demand for the goods. There's a lot of buyers for the good. But there's not any good alternatives. There's not a lot of competition. All right, whereas with Five Guys, they would have a lot of competition. And even though their product is differentiated, one burger is not that different than another burger. So the correct answer would be EpiPen. All right, so today we're going to look at two different types of market structures. And we're going to use those characteristics from yesterday to help identify them. The first one we're going to look at is what we call a perfect competition. Oops. So a perfect competition is when you have a lot of sellers of the exact same good. Well, you might also see it as a pure competition. All right. So it's a very simple form of business organization, but it's not super realistic. All right. So yeah, the key things of the perfect competition: you're going to have a lot of sellers. They all have I'm really bad about that today. All right. You're going to have a lot of sellers. All right. Sellers that can enter and exit the market really easily, and they're going to have pretty close to identical products. And so because of that, they're going to have virtually no market power. The best example we can look at this is with gas stations, right? Coming from your house to school today, chances are you pass 5 or 6 gas stations along the way, all of them selling identical goods, right? Gas is gas, it would be a commodity, all right? And chances are their prices weren't that different. However, there's no such thing as a real perfect competition because gas stations are more than just gas, right? If you look at Racetrack over by Sam's Club, all right, they're able to have some kind of cheaper prices because they've also got a store attached to their gas station, right? They sell food and milk and things like that. On the other side of things, Walmart has a gas station that's generally pretty cheaper, all right, because they can lower their prices down lower because they make more money from their grocery store. And so there's no real perfect competition, but gas stations are about as close as we can get. You got a lot of sellers of the identical good, and this is the best kind of market we could have, really. All right, because then all businesses have to compete on with one another is their prices, trying to keep their prices as low as possible. All right, the flip side of that would be our monopolies. A monopoly is when you only have one seller of a good and there's no close substitutes. All right, so there's got to be some kind of barrier to entry in here, like we talked about yesterday. So if you look at Georgia Power, they're the only supplier of electricity. Right? There's subsidiaries like Okefenokee Electric or Savannah Electric, but they're all owned by Georgia Power, so they're not really in competition with one another. All right, but there's always going to be barriers to entry. All right, so for Georgia Power's case, they're given a license to sell electricity, right? And the state of Georgia only lets them sell electricity. All right, the reason they do that is because it's easier to regulate them that way. All right, secondly, they have what's called a natural monopoly. It makes sense that we only have one electric company. It makes sense that we only have one water company, right? Because let's say that I were to open up my own electric company as well. First off, economies of scale is the fact that the larger a business gets, the cheaper it is to produce that good. So for Georgia Power, they already have a whole power grid. If I wanted to open up my own electric company, I'd have to build my own power grid. And so we'd have to have twice the power lines, twice of the electric stations, twice of the nuclear plants, all to provide the exact same product. And so because of that, it kind of makes sense that there's only one electric company. All right, because the market doesn't really need two. All right, and so we've got three main things that can cause barriers to entry here. First off is an important resource. So if you think about that De Beers Diamond Company, right? They have a monopoly on diamonds because they own all the diamond mines, or at least like 90% of the diamond mines. So no one else can produce these, and so they can really jack up the rates of diamonds because there's no competitors there. Secondly, the government can issue rights to a monopoly. And this is where you would see the patents or the copyrights of the trademarks, right? So since Daraprim developed that drug, they've got a certain number of years where they're the only ones that can produce it. At the same time, if you look at, like, let's say a book or a song, same thing. The government's going to give that artist the right to be the only one to produce that. That way they can profit from their new ideas. All right, and then finally, this is what we were talking about with Georgia Power. For cost of production, it makes sense that there's only one seller. So we don't really need another electric company to come into the state of Georgia to build this big power grid to only provide the same exact product that Georgia Power is already producing. All right, so this economies of scale is kind of what we see with Walmart as well, right? The fact that they're already so big means that they can produce things for cheaper. Because Walmart owns their own factories and their own farms and their own trucks and their own forklifts, right? They're able to really streamline everything, and because of that, all right, their box of cereal is going to be a lot cheaper than a box of cereal over at Publix because they're on such a large scale. All right, and so with monopolies, they have to have some kind of economy of scale because the bigger they get, the cheaper they're going to be able to produce. All right, and we've already talked about these a little bit. A natural monopoly is one to where it makes sense that there's only one business. So like, think of our school store. It makes sense that they have a monopoly on selling clothes at Brunswick High School. We don't want or need two clothing stores at Brunswick High. All right, so we're able to get all of this from one place. And the government issued monopoly, again, this is when the government provides an exclusive right to sell a product. All right, and so you see this with a lot of military technology as well, like microwaves or GPS, things like that. The government's creating these products, they have a patent for it. They're the only ones that can produce it for a certain number of time until it becomes public domain. And then we start to get our own GPS, and then we start adding them on the phones, and we make it easier and earlier as the market kind of adjusts. All right, and so this kind of builds on what we looked at with corporations earlier in the week. And so a franchise is just when the government allows, when a business allows others to use their name, to use their likeness within a certain geographical area. So if you look at McDonald's in Glenn County, all right, they're not actually a corporation, they would be a franchise. All of those McDonald's are owned by one man. And so McDonald's Corporation lets him use their name, lets them use their like trademarks like McFlurry or Big Mac, things like that. And so, sorry, that's a phone call. A franchise is when a corporation lets an individual use their name. So you might have a family member that sells like Avon or something like that, or sells jewelry, or uses uses that franchise name of another company. And so when we get over to the Google Meet in a second, we'll talk about the advantages and disadvantages of that style of franchise. I think this might be it. Let me double check. Oh yeah. So I want to talk about price discrimination, and then we'll be done. All right. So price discrimination is when a business can charge different customers different prices, and this could be for good reasons. This could be for bad reasons. All right, so we'll watch a video about the bad reasons in just a little bit. All right, hold on, making a note to myself. All right, so the good reasons can be a lot of different things, right? If you look at your platinum or those platinum cards, right, people get discounts on those because they're good students. All right, if you look at a lot of restaurants, they've got early bird discounts. All right, they'll charge lower prices during certain parts of the day to get more customers in the door. A lot of places have military discounts. All of these would be forms of price discrimination, but they're all good forms of it, right? People are charged less for certain good characteristics about themselves. Now, the downside of that is that a lot of people face negative forms of price discrimination. If you look at my mother as a good example here, right? She taught me everything I know about cars. All right, and so I remember I went with her one time to take her car into the shop because there was something wrong with it that she didn't know how to fix that we couldn't figure out together. And so I remember that whenever she got, or whenever the car deal or repair place called her, they gave her this big laundry list of everything that was wrong with her car. All right, and I remember that one of the things they included on there was that she needed to replace her windshield wipers, which she and I had done together like 2 weeks beforehand. Like they were brand new windshield wipers. But they were discriminating against her because she was a woman. They thought that she didn't know anything about cars, and so they tried to take advantage of that. All right, and there's been a ton of examples of racial discrimination when it comes to prices as well. And that's what we'll look at with our video today. So switch over to the Google Meet, we'll talk a little bit about the video, and then we'll watch that also.